After two lawmakers were assassinated, Trump shrugged it off as a setup. Jasmine Crockett fired back, and what she said made headlines worldwide. It was still dark. When Monica Deering got the call, she worked dispatch out of the Champlin Police Department, 20 years on the job, and nothing ever made her hand shake when she picked up the receiver. But at 2:04 a.m. that Saturday, her hand did officer down. Repeat, officer down, shots fired. Champlin area address is registered to Senator John Hoffman. Monica froze, not because it was a senator, but because she'd just seen him 2 days ago at a school board meeting, helping a local principal get grant funding. He looked tired but proud. She remembered him holding a styrofoam cup, nodding to her in the hallway. Now he was bleeding out in his own home. Officers were already en route, but the call felt heavier than usual. Not rushed, not chaotic, almost calculated, as if someone knew what they were doing. The first responding unit reported back. What they saw, front door forced Hoffman, shot twice in the chest. His wife unconscious near the kitchen island. Their teenage daughter had locked herself in the pantry and dialed 911, whispering between sobs. He looked like a cop. He had a badge. He said, "Open up, police." But my mom knew something was wrong. She tried to push him back. Police body cam footage from that night wouldn't be released for days, but leaked radio chatter filled the airwaves by morning. The voice of Officer Callan shaken, saying, "This guy had patches of belt, even a walkie, but it's all fake. None of it matches department issue." Before investigators could even set up the perimeter tape, the second call came in 9.8 miles away, in Brooklyn Park. This time there was no daughter in the pantry, no one to make a call. Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker, was found dead on her front porch. Her husband Mark died on the living room floor. Neighbors heard the shots, but assumed it was firecrackers until police cars sealed off the block. The gunman had vanished, no tire tracks, no sign of forced entry. But both homes showed signs of the same method, posing as law enforcement, targeting elected officials at night. Deliberate rehearsed cold by 9 a.m. News stations were scrambling, push notifications, flooded phones, nationwide. Minnesota lawmakers targeted in apparent double homicide reporters speculated it might be domestic, even cartel-related, until Minneapolis FBI agent Nicole Chavez gave the first formal update. This appears to be politically motivated. She said, her voice flat and clipped. "We believe these attacks were premeditated and connected." Both victims were public Democratic officials. That line sent a chill through half the country, across living rooms and breakfast tables. Americans were forced to consider something they hadn't really believed could happen. Here, two politicians gunned down in their homes by someone who wasn't angry at them personally, but who saw them as enemies, targeted like prey in Winona. A retired veteran stared at the television and muttered, "This country's gone off the rails in Flagstaff." A high school civics teacher wiped tears from her eyes, and in Washington, Jasmine Crockett turned her phone face down and whispered, "They're not going to say what really happened." She wasn't wrong as the hours passed. Statements rolled in from lawmakers, tragic, unthinkable. "We stand united." But no one dared use the word that was floating just beneath the surface: assassination. Only the families were honest about it. John Hoffman's brother Arthur stood in front of the hospital that night, his hands clenched into fists. He didn't die for his opinions. He died because someone made him into a symbol. He loved his district. He helped people. That's all, but this wasn't just about one man's politics or a neighbor's grudge. This was about something that had been brewing for far too long and was now burning straight through the walls of American homes. By mid-afternoon, the name was out. Vance Eldrick Bolter, 57 years old, born in Rochester, Minnesota. He hadn't lived there in years. His trailer was parked just outside a crumbling industrial zone near Anoka. Nobody in town had seen him in over a week, maybe more. But his online trail told a louder story than his neighbors ever could. He wasn't a cop, never had been. But you wouldn't have known that if you'd seen him the night before. He wore a full dark blue uniform complete with shoulder patches, combat boots, and a utility belt with pepper spray, plastic cuffs, and a firearm. The badge was a knockoff, a replica ordered online from a surplus site out of Missouri. His car, a decommissioned Crown Victoria, had a magnetic police decal slapped onto the side with a dash-mounted light that still worked inside the glove box. FBI agents found a printed map of the Twin Cities with 12 addresses circled in red. 12 John Hoffmans was circled, so was Melissa Hortman's, and next to both names, scribbled in jagged pen, DFL traitors. Bolter's manifesto was barely legible, handwritten across 38 pages of notebook paper, but what they could read was chilling. He believed the government was collapsing, that patriot militias had been called to clean house. He mentioned January 6th as the opening shot and referenced dozens of conspiracy theories from sites like Truth Social and Telegram, many centered around Democrats being domestic invaders. But the part that made FBI agents pause was on page 7, scrolled in the margin. He told us to take it back. He told us they were destroying everything. I believe him, he wasn't named. But the quote had been said almost word for word at a campaign rally just 5 days earlier in Tulsa, Oklahoma, by Donald J. Trump back at headquarters. Agent Nicole Chavez stared at the note for a long minute and said, "This wasn't random." Her team had already found more in the trunk of Bolter's car, parked at an abandoned gas station outside Elk River. They uncovered tactical gear, a burner phone, a folder labeled Enemies Within, and 2 handwritten letters addressed to talk radio hosts. One of them ended with, "If no one will act, I will." There was no question. Now this wasn't some unhinged loner with a grudge. This was a man who'd been preparing carefully, quietly, for something he thought was justified. They also found hard copies of dozens of social media posts, not his own, but screenshots from prominent conservative voices, headlines calling Democrats satanic memes, comparing public officials to invaders, hashtags like #EnemyWithin and #Second Civil War, underlined in blue marker. Bolter didn't create this language. He consumed it, and then he acted on it. That realization sent ripples through law enforcement, because the truth wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. It meant this could happen again to someone else in another city. At another door, a press briefing was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Journalists were already lined up outside the Bureau's St. Paul field office, whispering rumors and prepping questions. They weren't sure they'd be allowed to ask. Chavez stepped up to the podium, took a breath, and said plainly, "We have reason to believe this individual was motivated by extremist political ideology. He impersonated law enforcement to gain access to the homes of elected officials. This was a planned, deliberate attack." Reporters' hands shot up, but Chavez cut them off. "We are working with local and federal agencies to determine if there are additional targets still in danger. That is our priority right now." She didn't mention the name on the final page of the hit list, but inside the Bureau's war room it was clear the list ended with one last name scribbled larger than the rest and circled twice. Jasmine Crockett. She had no idea. But by morning, the entire country would be watching her every word and waiting to see whether she'd stay quiet or light a match. That's it by Sunday morning. Makeshift memorials lined the sidewalks in both Champlin and Brooklyn Park. Candles flickered against plastic rain covers. Handwritten notes were tucked under bouquets of white lilies. One sign outside the Hoffman house read, "You gave us your voice. We'll never forget." But there was still blood on the brick steps. John Hoffman's front porch hadn't been cleaned. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze, and a little girl from across the street kept staring at it. From her scooter, her mother had to pull her back, whispering something about "not today" inside the Hoffman household. It was too quiet. John had survived. Barely a bullet had nicked his lung, and the second pierced his abdomen. He was intubated, unconscious. His wife, Yvette, was bruised and concussed, but conscious enough to recognize the faces around her hospital bed. She kept asking for their daughter Leah, who hadn't spoken since the shooting. When investigators arrived to speak with her, she just pointed toward the fridge. Taped on the door was a cartoon drawing she had made the night before. A man in a police uniform, except the face wasn't finished. Just blank, like she couldn't or wouldn't draw it. "I knew he wasn't real," she whispered. "He said he was police. But he didn't knock like one. My mom could tell, too." Across town, Melissa Hortman's house had already been cleared by the forensics team. What remained inside was a still life of sudden death. A breakfast plate, untouched. A robe tossed over the arm of the couch. Blood pooled across the hardwood floor, near the front window. Her husband, Mark, had managed to throw a lamp at the intruder. It shattered. They found pieces embedded in Bolter's pant leg. Later that night, it didn't stop him. Melissa didn't stand a chance. She opened the door. That's all her son Caleb flew in from Madison when he heard 23 years old, just finished his master's in environmental law. The moment he stepped into the living room and saw where his dad had fallen, he collapsed. His uncle had to carry him out. Caleb later told a reporter, "I grew up watching my mom fight for everyone. Schools, clean water, mental health clinics. She deserved a parade, not a bullet." The funeral was scheduled for Thursday, but calls were already flooding in from journalists, senators, foreign diplomats. Tributes poured across social media. But so did something darker under the governor's statement of mourning. A string of anonymous replies began to appear. She pushed the wrong agenda. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. He was just defending the country. One comment had nearly 2,000 likes before Twitter finally deleted it. It read, "2 down, 11 to go." Local authorities increase patrols around lawmakers. Homes, some receive silent security details, others like State Reps Lorna. Givens canceled their upcoming town halls out of fear. "I've never once feared my constituents," she told her assistant. "But now I don't even know who's watching me at the gas station." That Monday, Governor Tim Walz gave a televised address. His voice cracked in the middle. "This is not what democracy looks like. We don't settle differences with bullets. If we let this become normal, we're finished." But the fear had already settled into people's routines. State employees checked their rearview mirrors more often. Staffers kept their ID badges turned around, some even deleted campaign photos from public view. And still no statement from Trump. Not a tweet, not a press release, not even a pause in his campaign tour. Just silence, until finally. At a rally in Tulsa, someone shouted from the crowd, "What about the Minnesota Dems?" Trump smirked, adjusted the mic and said, "Another setup by the radical left. You'll see, they lie about everything, just like they lied about January 6th. The crowd roared back in D.C. Jasmine. Crocker watched the clip on her phone. She sat alone in her office, staring at the screen. Her coffee had gone cold. Her phone buzzed with texts from staffers, news alerts, security updates. But she ignored them all. She just kept watching that clip again and again. At one point, she whispered to herself, "He doesn't even care. They're dead." But that silence, the one echoing through politics, through media, through the country, was about to be broken. And when it was, it would hit like thunder. The Tulsa heat didn't let up that day. The rally crowd was thick. People in red hats fanned themselves with signs. water bottles, and old rally flyers. From 2020, the stage was already lit with blue and white strobes, and a giant screen replayed past speeches like a greatest hits reel. Outside the perimeter, a small protest had formed, 20 or 30 people holding signs. Words have consequences. Say their names. Hortman, Hoffman. A few of them chanted a few, just stood there quietly, like they were waiting for someone to listen inside. No one was listening. Trump emerged to music and cheers. "God bless the USA" echoed over the speakers, and the crowd roared as he waved both arms like a fighter entering the ring. The usual lines came out, fast. Witch hunt, rigged system, fake news. But something was missing. No mention of Minnesota. No condolences. No pause. Then a woman in the front row yelled, "What about the Democrats who got shot?" It was caught on multiple live streams. Her voice wasn't angry. It was genuine, like she expected him to say something reassuring. Trump tilted his head, smiled, and leaned toward the mic. "Fake news," he said. "You'll see. This is another setup by the radical left. They're always trying to make me look bad. They lie about everything. Remember? January 6th. Remember the Russia hoax, laughter, applause, chants of USA?" He shrugged. "I don't know who did what in Minnesota. But I'll tell you this. The real danger is what they're doing to your freedoms, your country, your guns, your jobs. That's what we should be angry about. Not even 5 seconds of acknowledgement. Not a name. Not a moment of silence. Just a pivot. Like their lives didn't even register in the press box." A junior reporter from the St. Paul Ledger turned off her camera. "That's it," she whispered. "He's not even going to say her name." Her editor shook his head. "Nope, he won't give it oxygen the next day." Right-wing news anchors picked up the same script. One called "The Shootings" suspicious. Another asked if it was possibly staged to push anti-conservative narratives. An influencer on YouTube posted a 45-minute rant claiming Melissa Hortman had ties to secretive leftist groups and that the attack conveniently benefits Democrats in an election year. It was coordinated, maybe not formally, but spiritually. Distraction, deflection, dehumanization, and it worked for a while. Social media didn't know what to believe. Some mourned, some mocked, some asked what Melissa Hortman did to provoke it. The lines blurred, and the truth got swallowed up in noise. But not for Jasmine Crockett. She'd been quiet for 2 days. Mostly out of caution, her security had been doubled. The Capitol Police advised her not to respond publicly, yet too dangerous too soon. But Crockett wasn't wired for silence. She watched the Trump rally alone in her apartment. Barefoot legs folded under her, on the couch, laptop on her knees. She rewound it 3 times, that smirk, that casual wave of dismissal. Her jaw clenched. They weren't even people to him, she murmured at 11:42 p.m. She opened her notes app and began typing. She didn't call her comms director, didn't run it through legal, didn't wait for clearance. She just typed, and by 2:03 a.m., almost exactly 48 hours after the first shot was fired in Champlin, her statement was ready. Not a tweet, not a thread. A press conference scheduled for 9 a.m. One reporter got the email and whispered to her colleague, "Oh, she's about to set the place on fire." But even they didn't realize how raw it was going to get, how loud, how honest, how impossible to ignore. The press room in the Robern building was packed by 8 a.m. Cameramen adjusted tripods, producers whispered into headsets, staffers lined the walls, arms folded, waiting. The energy wasn't like the usual D.C. briefings. This wasn't for policy points or pre-approved talking lines. This was about blood, about silence, about whether anyone would finally say what everyone else was too scared to admit. Jasmine Crockett walked in at 9:01 a.m., sharp, no blazer, no teleprompter, just a black blouse, loose curls, and a stack of printed pages in her hand. The room fell quiet the moment she stepped behind the podium. She didn't waste time. I'm not here today to give you polished statements. I'm not here to say thoughts and prayers, or to hold hands with people who helped light the match. I'm here because two of my colleagues were murdered in their homes by a man who believed the lies too many people in power are still telling. She paused, not for effect, but because her throat caught for just a moment. Melissa Hortman spent her entire career fighting for Minnesotans. John Hoffman worked with both parties to get mental health services into schools. And yet someone looked at them and didn't see people. He saw enemies. Why? Because someone told him that's what they were. Cameras clicked. No one moved. We've heard nothing from the man who's been the loudest voice in the room for 8 years. Not a name. Not a condolence. Just deflection. Just another rally. Just another way to say, don't blame me. Crockett held up a sheet of paper. This is from Vance Bolter's manifesto, page 7. She read it aloud. He told us to take it back. He told us they were destroying everything. I believe him. Tell me, she said, lifting her eyes, who do you think he is? No one answered, but everyone knew. She continued. He didn't have to give a direct order. He didn't need to send a text. All he had to do was keep saying the same things over and over, that Democrats are evil, that we're dangerous, that we're destroying America. And someone who already felt lost, who was already angry, took that as permission. The emotion in her voice cracked, but her posture never changed. Some of y'all want to pretend like this was random, that this man was mentally unstable, but let's be real. He was radicalized slowly, publicly, and no one in his corner ever said, stop. They encouraged it. They profited off it. They fundraised on it. She flipped the page and set it aside. I've had people tell me, you should be careful. You're gonna make enemies. Baby, the enemy's already got guns and fake badges. The least I can do is speak. There was a short chuckle in the back, a startled one. But she didn't flinch. So here's what I'm calling for today. First, emergency legislation to protect elected officials at every level, federal, state, local. I'm talking resources, personnel coordination, not just for me, for every public servant trying to do their job without a target on their back. Second, we need a full congressional hearing on political violence, not next year, not after the election. Now let the country see who's behind this language, how it spreads, and what it's doing to us. Third, and I don't care how unpopular this is, we need to stop pretending that this is just about extremists in dark corners of the internet. This stuff is coming from podiums, from stages, from microphones, with millions of followers that matters by now. Every journalist in the room had stopped taking notes. They were just listening. Crockett leaned forward, and finally, to the people who want me to be quiet, you've picked the wrong woman. The room exploded in questions, but she stepped away from the podium, ignoring them all. Back in Texas, her father watched on television with his hand resting on the remote. He didn't say much, but he muttered under his breath, "That's my girl." Social media exploded within the hour. The hashtags shush, shush, say their names. And as she spoke were trending by noon. Some called her reckless, some called her brave. But even those who didn't agree with her politics couldn't deny the power in her voice. One veteran journalist tweeted, "I've been covering Congress for 27 years. I've never seen a speech like that from a freshman rep. Not once." But Crocker didn't say what she said to trend. She said it, because someone had to say it, and too many people who should have chose silence instead. By that evening, the clip of Jasmine Crockett's press conference had been viewed over 5 million times. It ran on every major news network. But the real fire was online. TikTok, Instagram, Reddit. People reposted the same 30-second excerpt over and over, like it was a rallying cry. He told us to take it back. He told us they were destroying everything. I believe him. The words weren't hers. They were Bolter's. But when she read them out loud, it felt like a mirror had cracked wide open. Some tried to twist it. Conservative influencers edited her speech down to cherry-picked quotes, making her look angry, divisive, emotional. But it didn't matter. The full speech was out there, raw, uncut, and it spoke for itself. Back at FBI headquarters in St. Paul, the digital evidence team was deep into Bolter's phone records. What they found stunned even the most experienced agents. His social media wasn't just filled with conspiracy theories, it was a copy-and-paste blueprint of everything Crockett had warned about: Facebook posts railing against traitors in Congress, Telegram groups filled with countdowns and talk of the final war, screenshots of Trump's speeches, with quotes circled. In Red, Bolter had even made voice memos, 26 of them. Each one was short, angry ranting, and in more than half of them, he repeated the same lines Trump had used during his rallies almost verbatim. He said, "It's time to fight like hell. They're stealing our country. They hate America." One agent turned to another and said, "This guy didn't just follow Trump. He studied him. They pulled transcripts, compared language, mapped the timeline, and the overlap was impossible to deny." Meanwhile, Crockett's team got hold of the same documents. They didn't release them to the press yet, but they prepared them. She didn't want to lead. With opinion, she wanted the country to see how deep this messaging had gone, how far someone was willing to take it. 3 days after the press conference, she gave her first interview live on national television. The host opened with a basic question. "Congresswoman Crockett, are you blaming Donald Trump for what happened in Minnesota?" She didn't blink. "I'm holding him accountable for the part he played when someone uses your words to justify murder. You can't pretend your hands are clean." The host pushed back. "But isn't that inflammatory in what world?" she replied. "Is it inflammatory to tell the truth about where this hate is coming from? I'm not talking about policy disagreements. I'm talking about the kind of language that turns neighbors into targets, that turns public servants into traitors, that turns a man into a killer." She held up the Bolter, quote, again, read it slowly. "He told us to take it back. He told us they were destroying everything." I believe him. That's not a metaphor. That's a murder note. The clip went viral before the interview even ended in Minneapolis. Someone painted those exact words across a downtown wall in black and white. I believe him underneath it. Someone else spray-painted, and so did he. The murals were taken down in less than 24 hours, but not before they'd been photographed and shared 1 million times. The backlash came fast. Conservative PACs labeled Crockett as dangerous and divisive. Fox News hosts mocked her tone, her hair, her past tweets. One called her emotionally unstable. Another said she was pulling the race card, but she didn't respond. Not directly. Instead, she went to the House floor with a stack of quotes. One from Bolter's manifesto, one from Trump, one from a far-right blog. She read each one out loud. Then she said, "You tell me which one came from the murderer, and which ones didn't." No one answered. Not one member of Congress said a word, because the truth was they sounded exactly the same. But Crockett knew this moment wasn't about catching headlines. It was about forcing a country to face the storm it helped build word by word, lie by lie. The reactions came in waves in Houston. A group of college students organized a candlelight vigil for Hortman and Hoffman. They read quotes from each of their past speeches and stood in silence as Crockett's words played through a Bluetooth speaker in Minneapolis. People chalked messages of grief and anger on the courthouse steps. "Not one of us is safe. If lies are law," someone wrote. But while empathy bloomed on one side of the country, the backlash on the other side turned vicious. Crockett's office in Dallas received over 400 voicemails. In a single day, half were supportive. The other half, not so much. "You better watch your mouth before you end up like them. Go back to wherever the hell you came from. One less Democrat wouldn't be a loss." Her staff flagged the most violent ones for Capitol Police. They'd gotten threats before, sure, but these were different. They weren't vague. They mentioned routes, buildings, appearances. They sounded like people who had done their homework. Crockett didn't flinch, at least not in public, but privately. She told her mother to stop answering calls from unknown numbers. She asked her assistant to change her flight itineraries more frequently. And one night, after a long day of interviews, she locked all 3 deadbolts on her apartment door and sat with her back against it. For almost an hour, the pressure wasn't just external. Democratic leadership was nervous. A closed-door meeting was held among senior party members. One congressman suggested she tone it down to avoid becoming the center of a storm. Another said her remarks could energize the wrong base. Someone else floated the idea of releasing a joint statement with more neutral language. But Crockett wasn't interested in neutral. "This isn't about me," she told her chief of staff. "This is about the fact that a man dressed as a cop killed 2 lawmakers, and nobody wants to talk about the gasoline that got him there." Support for her message, though, kept growing. Teachers across Wisconsin wore black in solidarity. A pastor in Ohio referenced her speech in a Sunday sermon about courage. Even a few Republican veterans off the record told reporters they were deeply disturbed by the way certain voices had normalized the idea of civil war. Still, every show of support seemed to trigger twice. The hate late one night. Crockett's intern scrolled through comment sections, her mouth tightening with every post. She's trying to start a race war, loudmouth troublemaker, fake congresswoman with a fake story. The intern looked up and asked, "How do you deal with this?" Crockett took a moment before answering. "I don't try to fight all of it. I just make sure the people who need to hear me, hear me." And they were hearing her. Her speech had sparked more than conversation. It had ignited reflection in town halls across America. Voters asked questions about political violence. City councils passed emergency motions to audit security protocols for elected officials. One mayor in Oregon started holding weekly forums titled "What We Say, What We Risk." But the movement didn't stay polite. At a school board meeting in St. Cloud, a group of men stood up and started shouting about government overreach and patriots being silenced. One of them wore a shirt that said, "You're either with us or against us." Another had a tattoo that matched a symbol found in Bolter's notebook. Tensions were spilling into spaces. They didn't belong. One morning, Crockett's team received a package with no return address. Inside, an empty badge holder, a bullet casing, and a note that read, "We know where you stand, and we know where you sleep." It was handed directly to Capitol Police. Her team expected her to cancel her next appearance. Instead, she went to Minneapolis. She stood at the very steps where people had left flowers for Hortman, and she spoke to a crowd of 500 in the cold. "They want me to shut up. They want you to stay scared. But I'm telling you, right now, we don't back down. Not for cowards, not for killers, not for anybody who thinks murder is a form of protest." The crowd stood in silence for a beat, then erupted in cheers. But while her voice got louder, so did the backlash. And every word she said pushed the country closer to a reckoning it could no longer avoid. Capitol Hill hadn't seen a line like this in years. By 7 a.m., it wrapped around the Dirksen Senate office building. Students, teachers, retirees, journalists, veterans, and a whole lot of people who never once imagined they'd wake up early to watch a congressional hearing inside Room 106 had been converted into a security fortress. Bomb sweeps, ID checks. No bags, no phones, only press and pre-approved guests. The seats filled fast, and the air carried a strange tension. Not chaos, not excitement, just the thick expectation that something serious was about to happen. The title on the docket was Plain Hearing on Domestic Political Violence and Public Rhetoric. Jasmine Crockett sat in the first row of the chamber, not behind the dais, but near the witnesses she'd insisted on hearing every word. Face to face, first to speak, was FBI agent Nicole Chavez. Her report was methodical, focused, unemotional. She confirmed that Bolter had tracked 12 public officials, researched their routines and printed documents linking language from speeches, podcasts, and rallies to his personal notebook. She confirmed that he had attended 2 campaign events where violence was openly discussed among audience members. No one intervened. No one reported. It was there, a direct order to commit murder. One senator asked. No, she said, but the ideology came with a loaded gun. Next came testimony from Caleb Hortman. He looked exhausted, pale, his hands shook as he held his statement. My mom served this country. She loved policy, loved people, even when they yelled in her face. She always said, we serve even the ones who hate us. She died for that principle, and some people want to make excuses for it. I'm here to tell you. Don't? He paused, eyes darting toward the committee. Don't you dare let her death be just politics. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Then came a man. No one expected a former Trump campaign staffer, mid-30s, wire-rimmed glasses, red tie loosened around his neck. He asked to remain unnamed in public record. I worked advanced security for events in 2021 and 2022. I heard things backstage I'll never forget, speakers joking about cleaning house fans, bragging about who they'd shoot first if the Civil War came. We encouraged it, not directly, but we didn't stop it either. Why not? The senator asked. Because it kept people angry and angry. People donate the room, went still. Then the staffer leaned forward, his voice low. You don't realize how easy it is to turn a political slogan into a battle cry until someone like Bolter shows up with a weapon. The final witness was someone most people didn't recognize. Lorna Givens, Minnesota State Representative, former colleague of both victims. Her voice was steady, and she didn't bring notes. We talk about freedom, like it's guaranteed, but freedom depends on respect, on restraint, on remembering that words don't disappear when you're done using them. They land somewhere on someone. She turned toward the cameras. If you call people enemies, don't be surprised when someone picks up a weapon to fight them. Reporters typed frantically. The chairman called a recess. People spilled into the hallway, not shouting, not whispering, just shaken. Outside, Crockett finally emerged. A swarm of cameras followed. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just said, "We heard the truth in there. Now, let's see who's brave enough to act on it." That night, the hearing made front-page news. For once, the story wasn't twisted or watered down. It was clear political violence wasn't theoretical anymore. It was real. It had names. It had faces. And thanks to Crockett, it had a witness who refused to let the country pretend otherwise. But hearings are just words on paper. If no action follows and Crockett wasn't done, she was just getting started. By the following week, Crockett's face was everywhere. Magazine, covers, nightly news, banners, college flyers, and protest posters. One image in particular, a photo taken as she stood silently at the Capitol steps, with her arms crossed. Jaw set, wearing all black, had become iconic. The headline under it read, "She didn't blink," but with visibility came more weight. She could feel it in the emails from strangers, the bodyguards that now flanked her everywhere, and in the awkward silences during meetings with colleagues who didn't want to admit they'd once rolled their eyes at her. Some told her privately, "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." Others avoided her altogether, as if her courage might rub off in ways they weren't ready to carry. Still, Crockett never lost her focus. She introduced a new bill in the House, the Public Servant Protection and Accountability Act. The language was clear: direct extra funding for elected official security, a task force on political radicalization, and criminal consequences for those who use their platforms to incite real-world violence. The pushback came quickly. Some said it threatened free speech. Others claimed it was a power grab. One senior member of the House flat out told reporters, "We're not in the business of punishing words." Crockett's response, sharp and simple: "No one's punishing words. We're punishing outcomes." And the outcome here was 2 people murdered in their homes while their families slept. The bill picked up steam in unexpected places. Mayors, local judges, school board members, people who'd never gotten national attention, started calling her office, begging for support. They'd been threatened, followed their kids, had been doxxed. Their homes vandalized. One judge from Kansas left a voicemail that simply said, "Whatever you're building, put my name on it. I'm tired of fearing my own driveway." The cultural conversation started to shift. News anchors who once dismissed her as too emotional now began referring to her as one of the most unfiltered truth-tellers in Washington. Even opponents found themselves on the back foot, struggling to explain how their rhetoric hadn't contributed to a climate of fear and rage. But the hardest part wasn't in the halls of power. It was in public. Everywhere she went, someone would come up to her: airports, grocery stores, parking lots. They didn't ask for photos. They just said things like, "I'm glad someone finally said it. They should have listened sooner. My son wanted to be a city councilman. Now he's scared to run in Detroit." A black mother stopped her on the street with tears in her eyes. "My daughter watches you." She said, "17." She said, "If they don't like her, they won't like me either." Crockett took her hand. "Tell her to run." Anyway, it wasn't a slogan. It was a warning and a charge, because Crockett knew this wasn't just about stopping another bolter. It was about building a firewall before the country tipped over into something worse, something that couldn't be walked back. She started ending every speech the same way. "This is the line, the one we have to draw. If we don't, then truth becomes noise, violence becomes politics, and democracy becomes a memory." That message resonated beyond her base, independents. Progressives, even a few libertarians, saw the bigger picture. Not everything was about parties anymore. It was about survival of decency, of respect, of basic safety for people trying to serve. Still, not everyone agreed. In a live debate on national television, a political commentator accused her of exploiting tragedy for political clout. Crockett didn't flinch. "No," she said, "I'm exploiting truth. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's not me you have a problem with. It's your reflection." Her team worried about how that moment would land. But by morning, it was the top quote on every platform. A young voter posted, "She's not trying to be liked. She's trying to be honest. That's why I trust her." And just like that, the narrative was hers, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. But there was one thing left. One quiet moment. She still hadn't faced the part of the story that began at all. And that's where she needed to go next. The church in Brooklyn Park was small, nothing ornate. White siding, creaky pews, a cracked parking lot. But by the time the memorial began, every seat inside was filled. Neighbors, teachers, city workers, union members, a few off-duty nurses. People stood shoulder to shoulder, some holding photos, others just holding each other. Melissa Hortman's son, Caleb, stood at the altar, tie too tight, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't read a speech. He didn't need to. My mom told me politics was just public service. With a microphone, he said, blinking back tears. She believed the job was about showing up when no one else would. And she did every single time he looked down for a moment, then added, she didn't get taken because she was a politician. She got taken because someone stopped seeing her as a person. A long silence followed from the second row. Jasmine Crockett bowed her head, not for effect, but because she couldn't look Caleb in the eye just then, not without losing her composure. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped to the front, with no script, no notes, just a folded card, with 2 names written on the inside, Melissa Hortman, John Hoffman. "This ain't about me," she said, and it never was. These 2 people weren't symbols. They were living, breathing human beings. They took phone calls on Sundays. They answered emails at midnight. They visited hospitals. They stood in gymnasiums and tried to keep small-town clinics from shutting down. A few people nodded quietly. Others wiped their eyes. I didn't always agree with them. I argued with Melissa once about a housing bill. John and I butt heads over school policy. But I never feared them. I never questioned that they showed up because they wanted to help people. She paused, took a breath. What scares me now is how easy it's become to erase someone's humanity. One post, one headline, one sentence taken out of context. That's all it takes. And then someone's showing up to your door in the dark with a badge that isn't real and a weapon that is no one moved, not even the kids fidgeting in the back row. Crockett folded the card shut. Melissa and John weren't just lawmakers. They were people who sat at kitchen tables, who worried about their bills, who fought for their constituents, even when it cost them sleep, energy, and peace. They should be here, but they're not, and we need to stop pretending we don't know why. After the service, she didn't speak to the cameras outside. She walked past them and stood alone in the parking lot. Her security detail kept a quiet distance. A woman approached her, mid-60s, blue scarf, trembling hands. "I didn't vote for you," the woman said. "Didn't agree with what you said on TV, still don't, but you were right about how ugly it's gotten, about how fast we forget. People are still people." Crockett didn't say anything, just nodded once, and the woman walked away. Later that night, back in her hotel room, Crockett pulled out her journal and wrote a single line at the top of the page. Truth doesn't need permission. She didn't write anything else. By the end of the week, her bill had 63 co-sponsors in the House. Hearings were scheduled, threat assessments were updated for local officials. Across 9 states, security was quietly added to 4 more lawmakers who had previously refused it. But what mattered most wasn't the headlines or the votes. It was the fact that somewhere in Minnesota, a little girl named Leah Hoffman was finally talking. Again, she sat with a therapist in a quiet room and said he wasn't real. But my mom was, and somewhere in Texas, a 17-year-old girl scribbled a note in her notebook during civics class. "One day, I'll run just like her in a country tired of shouting." Crockett's words hadn't just pierced the noise, they'd stayed, long after the news cycle moved on, long after the slogans faded. The memory remained of 2 public servants of a nation, warned of a woman who refused to sit still. So say their names, not just in mourning, but in memory, in action, and in truth, because silence may feel safer. But courage is the only thing that ever changed anything. If this story moved, you share it, speak it, let it echo where silence once lived, and never forget. Democracy doesn't survive on autopilot. It survives on people who show up.